Lately, a lot of people are asking me if Tasmania is a good place to invest in property, coming off the back of the fact that Australia's East Coast capital cities are getting less and less affordable for people that would be buying property. Buying a shitty investment property is something that will slow down your progress for years and is a major frustration. So I wanted to unpack what to look for when you're buying an investment property to make sure that you get something that's actually going to make you money. Now with property, there's a lot of different ways to be right. You can buy, reno, flip, buy and hold for the long term, chase property hotspots, a lot of ways that have made people money in the past and may continue to make people money moving forward. The right move though really depends on what it is specifically that you're trying to achieve with your property investment. As I see it, one of the least risky ways to buy property is to buy a good quality property that is going to continue to make money for the long term and hold for the long term. Now, when you do this, you avoid purchase and sale costs. You avoid chasing the market around. You avoid a lot of the taxes that happen when you're buying property, making a gain, having to pay tax on that, and then having to go back in. So I see buy and hold for the long term as one of the least risky ways to invest in property, as well as one of the most effective ways. So the implication here is that if you're buying and holding for the long term, you need to buy a property that's going to grow for you in the short term, but going to continue to grow moving forward. And one of the biggest factors that drive these growth, or the two biggest factors, are supply and demand. Super basics and fundamentals here, but something that's easy to lose sight of in the moment and particularly important to apply the long-term lens to. Now, supply is driven by the amount of land that's available and the amount of new properties that are being built. So if you go to a place where there's a lot of land and a lot of new properties being built, the consequence is that the supply is going to increase moving forward. Demand is largely driven by how many people want to live there, what the population growth is. Now, the good news is that there's a lot of these statistics that are out there online, the forecast for population growth in certain areas, the forecast for property development in certain areas, and that gives you a good insight as to what properties are going to have the right combination of supply and demand. Now in Tasmania, we've seen a massive spike in demand over the last couple of years because the COVID pandemic has led to a lot of people moving to the work from home trend. People realize that they can work from anywhere. So why pay $2 million for a 2-bedroom apartment in Sydney when you can pay $2 million and get a 15-bedroom house in Tasmania somewhere? But the question really is, will that demand continue for the years and decades into the future, particularly if you're buying for the long term? If you compare Tasmania to an area like the eastern suburbs in Sydney or the lower North Shore, we've got strong forecast population growth, strong demand, and there's very limited supply because the areas are largely built out. There's limited new properties being built. There's limited approvals for increasing density in those areas, so that you know that the demand remains high, supply is not being met, so therefore property prices continue to grow moving forward. Now, there's a lot of different ways to be right here, as I said, and in the short term, I expect to see areas like Tasmania, Adelaide, and the more sort of fringe type suburbs that will continue to get some attention and see some good growth. But whether they continue to grow sustainably for the long term, time will tell. But if you're betting with hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, you want to make sure that you're going to be as rock solid as possible, and sometimes sticking to the slightly more boring and less exciting investments can be more effective.